Welcome to Childcare Conversations with Kate and Carrie.
Hey guys, so I want to talk to you about your savings account. Are you ready? Savings accounts.
No, I'm not ready.
That is not the first thing that people think of when they think of childcare. They do not think of the savings account, but that's what we want to talk about is how to fill up in business, we don't usually call it a savings account. The bank does, but we call it your contingency fund or your sinking fund.
Rainy day fund.
Rainy day. No, that's what the Texas state government calls it. Okay, so an account, whether it is a separate bank account or whether it's just a paper account, but a place that you are putting money for when things change.
Wait. You mean like things have changed in the last 6 months?
Well, I mean, things are constantly changing. There's always changes in the market, and it might be broad across the country changes, or they may be specific to your neighborhood changes. So it can be either way. And this is something Kate and I have been preaching about for more than 20 years. And it really came to fruition in 2020. So we're just kind of doing a little bit of look back at what happened 5 years ago. Like, where were you in your business 5 years ago?
Well, 5 years ago, I didn't know what was going to happen in 10 days.
Yeah. You never know what's going to happen in 10 days. That's my point, is that sometimes there's a global pandemic and nobody put that on your calendar.
Nobody told me.
Yeah, I didn't have that as an appointment, right? And 5 years ago today, we were still very much in the different states were deciding whether childcare should be all the way open, sort of open, maybe open. Maybe you had to submit paperwork to work in childcare or to have your kids in childcare. Like, this was a crazy time 5 years ago. But here's the thing, that could happen in a different way next week. A large employer could decide that they've had a whole bunch of remote work and everybody has to go back to the office now. Okay, that's going to increase the demand for childcare.
Or just the opposite.
Or for full-time childcare. Or they could be like, we're closing our physical plant. Everybody, that work from home thing was working out pretty well. We tried to force you all back to the office. Everybody got grumpy. So we're back to letting you be at home. Then the need for full-time care might go down. Or maybe there was a hospital that is
or an airport
or airport, right, that is downsizing or upsizing, either one, right? So maybe the local elementary school is being repurposed into a neighborhood community center because the enrollment is low at that elementary school where you've been picking after school kids up. You don't know when those changes are going to happen. Changes will happen because of things that happen in Washington, D.C. That's not what I want to talk about. I want to talk about what's happening for your program.
Absolutely.
And if it comes from the government, that's okay. If it comes from a local employer, that's okay. If it comes from a global pandemic, it's not okay.
Well, I'm not sure it's ever okay, but what we want to talk about today is going to be relevant across the board. So whether or not we end up with a measles, COVID, flu, or, major employers downsizing, or, pick one, right?
So, or pre-K being picked up by the neighborhood elementary school, yeah. Or Head Start being closed down, or there's so many things that can change. And if you have a savings account or a retained earnings account or whatever you want to call that pile of money that is there.
Can we call it the oh shit fund?
Sure, we can call it the oh shit fund. So if you've got that fund, the OSF, so we'll just call it from now on the OSF.
I'm going to write that down.
So if you've got the OSF, then you can handle it. You can buy yourself a little bit of time, but that doesn't mean that you use it all up. Okay. So that fund, in a perfect world, in the world that I want you to be living in, is that you have 6 months of operating expenses in that fund. So
okay, so you mean like 6 months of my rent?
No. Your payroll, your taxes, your milk money, all of it for 6 months.
Okay.
So that's a lot of money for some of you guys, right? That's like, you want me to have $1 million in a bank over here? Yes, I do. If you have $1 million in it, I want it to be an interest-bearing account. Really, I would like all of your savings account to be in some sort of interest-bearing account. And if we need to talk about where to put your savings in an interest-bearing account, let us know, and we will have a second conversation about that.
Well, we can give them a couple of references, right? Like there's NerdWallet to go do your research on, and then there's a couple of guys. What are the two guys that they have a podcast?
Yeah, I listen to so many podcasts, Kate. I don't know which one you're talking about.
I don't know. I don't listen to that many. You'd think I could remember. Anyway, there's some podcasts out there that talk about how to do the research and finding good, interest everything, right? So the lowest interest on certain things, the highest interest on other things, and how to use
lowest interest on credit card, highest interest on savings account.
Right.
There is a great podcast called Bad with Money. And that is done by a woman who is in either her late 20s or early 30s. And she always thought of herself as bad with money. So don't necessarily start with her most recent episodes, start with the earlier ones. And then now you got me thinking, what is the other one that I listen to all the time right now? So I'm going to look that up.
Okay, well, while you're looking that up, I'm going to talk just a tad. So
Okay.
as you are contemplating even the concept of an OSF, Carrie's figured out what she's going to say.
It's called The Financial Feminist. So that's the other one. Bad with Money and Financial Feminist are the two that I would recommend. Okay, so you were saying you have to have the fun.
What I was saying is, as you're starting to contemplate the concept of an OSF, we want you to do this on purpose. So in other words, don't make this accidental. It doesn't mean go take a loan out. It means to purposefully fund your OSF. And you can do this a couple of different ways, Carrie. You and I were talking beforehand about some of the different ways some of our clients currently do it, how we used to do it, and maybe even some other ideas that we've heard other programs around the country do successfully. So,
okay, first thing people are going to say is, oh, I'll just save money into there. You're not going to save your way out of this problem. This is not a saving problem. This is an earning problem. So you're not going to be like, okay, I'm going to save 5% and put it in. No, this is not a savings problem. This is an earnings problem. You need to earn money to put into this account.
Specifically. So in other words, any of the suggestions that you start today for the next however long it takes you to fund your OSF, put into that account directly. Like, don't use it for operating funds. Don't use it to give a raise to folks. This whole goal is to fund your OSF.
Okay, so let's talk about what I did when I was a brand new baby director and owner. So when I was a brand new baby director and owner, and I had spent almost all the money I had saved up to open my first school. So there was not much left in the kitty. So how did I fund it back then? I took the registration fee every time somebody registered for the program, and half of it went to whatever I needed to do to get that kid up to, ready for their first day. So buying them t-shirts, if I needed to buy another cot or mat, if I needed to buy more crayons, because I was bootstrapping it. So sometimes I needed to buy things at that level. But eventually it became, okay, this is a backpack for that kid or a diaper bag for that kid and t-shirts for that kid and a t-shirt for one of the parents. The other half of that went into the OSF. So the money came in, new registration, and all of the waiting list fees went into the OSF. Every time somebody paid a waiting list fee. And I collected a lot of waiting list fees over the course of my career, because if somebody was a good candidate when they came on a tour, I worked really hard to get them on the waiting list. if they were pregnant or they were happy where they were now, but they were looking for something when their kid turned 3. I was like, well, the only way we will have a spot for you is if you're on the waiting list. We almost never enroll straight into our 3-year-old program, yada, yada, yada. So all of the wait list money went into that account.
Wow. Okay. So, but that's good. That's, I mean, if I'm needing to earn $1 million, that's a lot of wait lists, Carrie. Is that the only thing I'm supposed to be doing?
No, but that's where I started. So what were some of the other things that we have talked about or we've done or had programs we've worked with done?
Well, I think one of the ideas I had while we were talking is depending on how you handle late fees, whether it's they show up late or they pay late. Again, these are things that are probably not currently in your budget. So one way to think about it is all of the income that comes in that's not already allocated in your income budget. So if you charge somebody $1 a minute for every time they're late, now some programs, that money goes directly straight to the teacher. Not every program operates that way. Other folks, if you don't pay it on the first, you have until the third, but the second and third, there's a late fee. Maybe those late fees get put into that OSF. So just another way to think about it.
It's late pickup fee and you've got the $1 or the $5 a minute after the grace period. My suggestion, just to build goodwill with your staff, is that you at least split it 50-50. But I've known programs where the staff were actually encouraging people to come in late so that they got extra money. So know your staff when it comes to that. But okay, so miscellaneous fees. So if you're charging a field trip fee and that field trip fee just covers the expense of the field trip, then that doesn't go in the OSF account. But the you paid your tuition late and it's annoying me fee, that can go into the OSF.
The PIA fee.
The pain in the patoot fee. So another way that I've known programs to do it is to go, okay, our functional, our baseline, this room has to have 14 kids or else, we're kind of freaking out. So 14 is the good number in this classroom. So kids 15 and 16 go in the OSF fund, and then kids 17 and 18 go into the fund. So parties, fun activities for the staff, that kind of thing. So that's another way we've seen it funded. Do you want to talk about?
Sure. There's absolutely. So there's different ways and different needs in your community. So if your community maybe has a need, maybe you haven't thought about it, for part-time care. So part-time care, you're already paying for the staff, you're already paying for the room. So having children come Monday, Wednesday, Friday, or Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday, or Tuesday, Thursday, whatever is going to be the least disruptive to the kids in your program and to your staff. So if you've got staff that have a tendency to call off on Mondays or Fridays, then maybe those aren't the days you add some part-time kids. Maybe you just add part-time kids Tuesday, Wednesday, or Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday. All of that part-time care that doesn't require additional staff, all of that goes into the OSF, all of it. So not, it could be, it's not even per classroom. It's just all that automatically goes over there. And what's really great, Carrie, is when you have a bookkeeper or somebody external who's kind of managing your finances, you can tell them this and they will just do it. So when you look at your bank account, you're not really seeing that difference. I know as an owner, as a person who earns money, as a person who spends money, and I know other people in my circle, that if they see that money in the bank account, they think that means they can spend it. And so sometimes you have to move that money immediately. And so this might be one of those situations if you're one of those folks. And it's okay to be honest with yourself. If you're just somebody that you're like, oh, look, I got an extra 10 grand in here, we're going to have a party and we'll take everybody out and we're going to have a big old party. But if really that 10,000 was meant to be part of your OSF, do yourself a favor and tell somebody to move that money even if you set that up with the bank. Because did you know that banks will do that? They do. That's how that whole Christmas accounts used to start.
Yep.
A lot of savings accounts are funded that way, where they just automatically move money the first of every month or every other week, however you get paid.
Yep. Another thing is maybe drop-in care. So you're like, okay, this room is at 16 kids. This is how many kids there are. We only take 16 kids in this room. Okay, well, Johnny is out for a week visiting grandma. That means I can put somebody else in Johnny's spot that week. And so having drop-in care for that week that Johnny's out of town, you've already been paid by Johnny's family for that week. And so this is basically, we're doubling up on Johnny's spot. Somebody else is paying us for Johnny's spot. So maybe it's a family that is looking to buy or rent housing in your area. And all of the local realtors know that if they call you, you might have free childcare or discounted childcare for that family. I like discounted better than free. And so the parents can drop that kid off for $40 for the day. And okay, that's not going to get me to $1 million really quickly, but I wasn't counting on that $40 for those 5 days that the parents are house hunting. So I've got $200 that I get to put into the OSF. And if I do that 10 times, I've got $2,000, right? So having different ways to have drop-ins that aren't super disruptive. So when we've got kids out sick, when we've got kids on vacation, you can have drop-ins go into those spots. Now, if you're having hand, foot, and mouth disease go through your program or something else that's really contagious or virulent, maybe we want the numbers down so that fewer people are going to get sick. But, just keep that in mind of having drop-in care where it's just, I'm filling a spot for somebody who's out sick or out on vacation.
Well, Carrie, one of my favorites is no cost electives. So we all know those families that pick that 4-year-old up at 5 o'clock and then take them to soccer and piano and to dance and to all these different electives or extracurricular activities. And they're paying a lot of money, where you could do some of that at your program depending on your staff and your staff's background. So you could have some of those extras, you could have them as incentives or freebies for reasons to enroll in your program, or you could even have them after hours.
Fill up my bank account.
Huh?
How's that filling up my bank account?
Well, if I'm empty and I don't have a wait list, it puts butts in the seats.
Okay. Well, so I'm going to take it the other route and say it's a no transportation electives.
Ooh,
So
like
both of
that.
those are possibilities. So you can be like, hey, you can pick your kids up to take them to karate class, or you can sign them up for karate class here. It's the same cost, and you don't have to drive your kid anywhere.
Well, and what's great is if that karate class is being taught by one of your staff that you already had in the building.
Absolutely. Or martial arts, or karate is martial arts, or gymnastics, or French, or Suzuki violin, or whatever the thing is that is popular in your
Art
neighborhood.
Classes.
Did you just say
yoga.
orange classes? Because what I heard was orange classes.
Art, A-R-T.
Okay, art classes, right. So that's another way to bring in a little bit of revenue. But I'm going to talk about two kind of controversial ones. One is shifting the way your parents pay for their enrollment and having them select what hours of care they want to have their kid there. So they're telling you they're going to drop off at 8 and they're going to pick up at 4. Cool. I can now have a drop-in. I can do one of two things. I can have drop-in care from 4 to 6 for that child, for that spot, or I can reduce my staffing because I have 7 kids who are leaving at 4 o'clock. Okay. So either I can use it as a revenue or I can use it as a savings. So this is, yes, or both. This is the wave of the future. So if you are trying to figure out how do those big, giant franchise programs run, This is one of the ways that they run. And this
Now,
is something that is coming more and more to more programs.
but is this really the wave of the future? Because I'm feeling a little back to the future, Carrie. Like I seem to recall another program I know that in the 90s kind of operated this way.
Oh, hush. Everything old is new again. So, yes, this is not a brand new thing, but it is so much easier now. We used to have to do this with giant whiteboards, and it could become quite cumbersome. But now, the same software that you use to schedule your staff, where you input everybody's availability and then it just spits out a schedule, you can do the same thing inputting all the kids' schedules, and it'll spit out how many are going to be there at each time. And you can end up, it's called over enrolling. So you're licensed for 150, but you have 178 children enrolled. You just only have 150 at a time because you have some kids who are sharing a space, but they're both paying full-time rates. Or they're paying different part-time rates or whatever.
Well, I mean, it's very easy, especially if you're doing, healthcare, because healthcare operates on kind of a different schedule than the rest of the world, right? They operate on 7 to 3, 3 to 11, 11 to 7. So if you've got kids that are coming in from 7 to 3 or 3:30, and then you have school agers that come in, I mean, like, that's perfect, right? Like, it really does maximize your license and your enrollment capabilities. So
yeah, and that happens a lot, or it doesn't happen a lot, but it should happen a lot, that you have kids that are there for what we might think of as part-time hours or Mother's Day out hours. They're leaving at 2 or 3 o'clock. And the number of programs that don't then have after schoolers come in and take those spots hurts my head, because you're paying rent on that building 24/7. And why are we not maximizing it?
okay.
So you can have full-time kids, part-time kids, and after-school kids all together.
Okay, you just said something, and I know it's where you were going, but I'm going to bring up the first part first. So you're already paying for this building. You aren't paying for this building 40 hours a week. So what are you doing the rest of the week? So take a look at your weekend use. Do you have the ability, and are you throwing birthday parties? If not, ask yourself why. Okay, as a parent who would have loved to have more opportunities for that so that I didn't have to clean my house and clean up afterwards, great opportunities. We did do that with lots of different organizations, and have some fun with what you do with your building on the weekends. A great opportunity to sublease, find partner organizations as well. And I know, Carrie, you're itching
Well,
hard.
I'm gonna piggyback on that and go, renting your space out to community organizations that want to have, I don't know, Polynesian American Festival, and they need a location. Well, you've got all of this ground. You've got your playground. You've got plenty of space. You've got physical space inside the building. Renting it out to community organizations.
You could rent it out to food trucks, and you could have little food truck parties, especially if they were kid-friendly food trucks. Sorry,
yep.
had to go there.
Your parking lot could and should be making money on the evenings and weekends, if you want to. Here's the other one that I think is something we really need to talk about, which is the non-traditional hours. So the hours after 6 p.m. and before 7 a.m. Those non-traditional hours, and of course weekends. We need to talk about it because we have a lot of families who need care during those times. Because if you work at the grocery store, there's a good chance you don't every day have a shift that starts at 7 and ends at 6 or something in between those. If you work at the grocery store, there are times they need you there until 9. There are times that you're an overnight stalker, not the creepy kind, the putting cereal on the shelf kind, right? You've got hospitals and other medical care, like Kate was talking about, nursing homes, other types of facilities And the people who work there need childcare. We've got people have been driving Kate and I in their Ubers at 4 a.m. Who's taking care of their kids when they're driving us to the airport at 4 a.m.? By the way, Kate, stop booking us at 4 a.m. Anyway, so there are lots of different reasons why people need care at these non-traditional times. They might be working a grocery store job or other retail job. Kate's number two son works a stocking job where he takes stuff off of a big truck and he sorts it and puts it in bins and labels it and stuff. He thinks it's great. He only has to talk to like 3 people all day. But there are so many jobs. We have it in our head that everybody works from sunrise to sunset. But that is not true, and it never has been true. But it used to be that people had enough of a social safety net that they knew their next door neighbor really well, and they could take their kid asleep over to the next door neighbor's house and their child would sleep on a sofa. Almost nobody does that anymore. So if that parent is a single parent or the parents have overlapping schedules, where are those children being cared for? And the answer is sometimes they're being left at home by themselves. Mm-hmm. And that's not good for anybody. And so we need to look at what are the non-traditional care needs in your community. And you don't have to know the answer. You have to know who to talk to find out the answer. And my first suggestion would be to talk to your local chamber of commerce, because they know an awful lot about what's happening in your community from an employer point of view.
Yeah. And so not only your employers, but just the community makeup, right? So, yeah, you know, how many people know their neighbor, how many people are single, how many people are working 2 jobs. And that's the other thing. Are those folks working 2 jobs? And so the one kind of thing that we haven't talked about, and I'm just going to plant the seed because it really could be its own episode, is sick care. Every state handles sick care slightly different as far as what you have to do to make a space available and different and, you know, basically truly a safe place for not only those children or that child, but also the other children in the building. So yeah, there are programs.
A lot of times it needs to be a separate building or at least a separate ventilation system.
It's an isolation issue. So I'm not really, like I said, it's a whole other thing. But if you happen to have medical professionals in your circle, so either spouses, maybe even some of your staff are actually registered nurses. And the most successful program I've seen of this is actually run by 2 registered nurses, and that's all they do is sick care. Now, their rates are crazy, but for a lot of families, losing a job or paying a crazy amount of money for one day, they're going to pay that crazy amount of money for one day because they want to keep their job.
And if you have a place with separate ventilation, you can have that. And again, depends on your state, but that's what is my frame of reference because that's what my state requires. It doesn't have to be someone you have on staff full time because you can pay a visiting nurse to come give that child medication 3 times a day because you don't want to be in charge of giving medication to a sick kid. But you can go, okay, every 8 hours, I need you to come by and give this kid Motrin. And you can pay the visiting nurse to do that. And yes, you're paying through the nose for it, but it is, you can absolutely absorb that in the cost of what you charge. Because a lot of those people who do that job are like my grandmother was. She was a theoretically retired nurse who did not let her license go until she broke her hip. And she just wanted a reason to leave the house occasionally. So she would just go and, you know, she medicated people in her community. That's what she did. Between the ages of like 65 and 80. She just walked around and just passed out medication.
Hopefully we've given you some ideas on how to fund your business's OSF. If you are not currently having an OSF for yourself, go do that. As a director, as an owner, you can fund your own personal OSF by training other staff and other programs. You can write a book. You can do a variety of things that are your own personal second, third, fourth, fifth revenue stream. Do not let your childcare center be your only revenue stream, because again, you need to have your own 6-month personal OSF. So on that, Carrie, I think we have exceeded our traditional podcast time limit. And so with that, what would you like to tell everybody?
If you learned something from this show, please share it with somebody who needs to know. That could be your partner, that could be your business owner, it could be your board. Share it with someone else who needs to know, because I know there were actionable things in this episode, and you need to be sharing it with other people in your team and in your life. And then go over to your podcast player of choice and write a review. And if we can figure out how, we will respond back to you. And we will talk to you next week. And hopefully we won't hurt your brain quite as much as we probably did this week. Talk to you soon. Bye.
Thank you for listening to Childcare Conversations with Kate and Carrie. Want to learn more? Check out our website at texasdirector.org. And if you've learned anything today, leave us a comment below and share the show.